Hi, I'm Michael.
And I'm Mary.
You know, there's not a person on this planet who hasn't faced tough times. But the good news is that tough times never last, but tough people do.
On this show, we're going to talk to some extraordinary people who have faced tough times, and they've come out better and stronger on the other end.
And they're going to share their stories, their struggles, and the lessons they've learnt.
Because no matter what you're going through, there's always a way forward.
This is Tough Times Never Last. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to the show. I'm Michael Kuzilny. Tough times never last, but tough people do. We've got a heartfelt story. We've got Geoff Cordner on the couch. He's the father of Ben Cordner, who unfortunately passed away Australia Day 2019. Thank you for coming on, Geoff.
Thanks, Michael.
It's something that many people go through, but tell us about the incident of beautiful Ben.
Yeah, it was Australia Day 2019. We had Ben had asked if he could have an Australia Day party at our house, in fact, and we had said no because we had some friends coming from overseas the next day, and we were trying to keep the house nice and tidy for our visitors. And another friend of his said, he would step in and have the party instead. And on that day, they started quite early and were having a great time. There was about 30-odd people, guys and girls there, just doing what young people do, dancing, drinking, having fun.
Where did they end up having it, Geoff?
So this was at his friend's house.
Right.
And that house was on a very steep block with a swimming pool at the bottom. And during the course of the day, some of the young guys, they were jumping in the pool and swimming, and then some of them went up onto the balcony and jumped into the pool. And then at some point during the day, a couple of the boys went on to the roof of the house to jump into the pool. And the first young man who did that landed safely in the pool. And the second to do it was Ben. And he didn't land in the pool, he landed on the edge of the pool. And he suffered injuries, internal injuries and head injuries, which ultimately took his life. Yeah.
Were you at home at the time, Geoff?
We were. My wife and I were. My wife had actually gone down to visit her mother, who lived very close to where this house was, where the party was on. And I was in a part of our house. I'd left my phone in our office, and I was in the kitchen dining area, and I was getting a phone calls from Ben's friends and also from my wife, but I didn't get those calls for about 10 or 15 minutes. But meanwhile, my wife had received the call, and she went to the house where the party was being held. And so as a result of that, she was there when Ben was still dealing with what had happened on the edge of the pool. There was kids trying to resuscitate him and so on. So she was actually there when that was all happening, whereas I arrived maybe 15 or 20 minutes later, by which time the paramedics were there, the police were there. And so it was a significantly more traumatic event for her as a result of the fact that she experienced all of that firsthand.
Oh, yeah, that's right, Geoff. And I think at one stage I read that she said, I don't think Ben's going to make it.
That's right. I mean, when we were driving to the hospital, because the helicopter arrived to transport him to North Shore Hospital, and the two of us were driving to the hospital to be there, and she said that to me. She said, I just don't think he's going to make it. And I've always tried to be a very optimistic person, and I couldn't bring myself to give up. But it was only after the event that I realised she had seen things that I hadn't seen. She'd formed an assessment based on much more information than what I had, and she was right. And he didn't survive the day.
No, and viewers, what a tragic event that, how do you move on from something like that? And I was reading that Geoff was holding Ben's hand, and then at the hospital, I think they turned off the life support, and you took a photo of him.
I was standing there on my own with him after he had this machine turned off, and I just couldn't bring myself to walk away. And eventually I did, but yes, I did take a photo of him. He had a black eye, but he otherwise looked like he always did, with what looked like actually minor injuries, but of course they were fatal injuries. And it's just an incomprehensible thing as a parent you just imagine that whatever the future may hold, that it's always going to involve spending time with your kids, and you're going to watch them grow up and have kids of their own, hopefully. And the idea that they're not going to be around for what I now call the unimagined future is something that's very hard to come to grips with. Yeah.
And tell us about the great man, Ben Cordner, because he was a bundle of joy, wasn't he? He a high achiever, and I saw that photo of you and the two boys when you were a bit younger, and you said, "This is my favourite photo."
Yeah, I mean, I was apprehensive about becoming a dad originally, because I wasn't sure whether I was up to the task. But what I hadn't appreciated was that that my boys would actually give me lots of lessons about what it meant to be a man. I learned a lot from them. They've both been incredible young men, but very, very different. The older one, Tim, was very much, you could always rely on him to do the right thing, always respectful, very good sportsman, good academically, reliable. Ben, ratbag, cheeky, getting into trouble when he was younger, always pushing the boundaries, great sense of humour, both of them. But Ben was he was always the one more likely to get into trouble at school. He was always the one more likely to have an accident, to scrape himself or break something. But he was a real character. He was one of those people that I think anybody who met him wouldn't forget him in a hurry. And the beautiful thing was that as he grew older, he although he was a bit cheeky and a bit anti-authoritarian when he was younger, he realised as time passed that was a fruitless exercise. And through the last few years of school, he became a really valued member of the cohort. He ended up being the vice captain of his school.
Which school was that, Geoff?
Ebbing Boys High School. And he then went on to university, Macquarie University, and that's where he really flourished. His academic results at university were just off the charts. He did 19 subjects there, 15 high distinctions, 4 distinctions. He just loved what he was doing, and he really connected with it. But the other part of his life that we didn't know as much about until after he passed away was the influence that he was having on people around him. And we got an amazing number of messages and emails and stories from people who told us how empathetic and compassionate he had been.
After the tragic event, Geoff, it would have affected so many of the children there as well.
Yeah. I mean,
and then I suppose everybody got back together at the funeral.
Yeah, actually, before that, there was a couple of days. Actually, it was either 1 or 2 days after the event, after the day that he died. I knew that a bunch of the kids were getting together to remember Ben, and sort of made a spontaneous decision to go there to see them all, because I wanted to say out aloud to them that we didn't hold them responsible for what had happened, that it was a decision Ben had made, and We didn't blame anybody. And that was, I think it was a really important, I didn't fully appreciate at the time, but I do now realise that was a really important choice to make, because it's allowed us to remain great friends with all of those young people. And we've continued to be part of each other's lives, and that's been enormously helpful to us, to be able to continue to have those friendships with all those young people.
Some people say life's 10%, what happens 90%, how we react to it. So it could have been so easy to go into the pit of depression. I suppose everybody goes through that grieving process. What's your mindset at that time, Geoff? What's your mindset on, I suppose, being the husband? You then take the role of trying to influence family members and your wife how to get through this.
Another decision we made very, very early, and I'm glad we made it, was on the morning of the 27th of January, we put, about 8 o'clock in the morning, we put a post on Facebook telling people what had happened and asking people if they wished to come and be with us. And a lot of people took up that invitation, and it made a huge difference, I think, to the way that we dealt with that immediate aftermath, because we realised much more clearly that it wasn't just our loss. It was everybody was experiencing loss and grief. Everybody who knew him, and even some people who didn't. And being able to share that with one another was very, very important. Another important moment, I think, was when my wife said to me, "We're not going to let this break us, are we?" And that was that was a very important moment, I think, because I think we both recommitted ourselves to each other, and also to our son Tim. Obviously, we wanted to make sure that he felt supported as well. And I do remember a conversation with him as well, just the two of us. And I said to him, "I hope you don't feel that you have to be anything more than what you already are, because you've been the most incredible son your whole life." And he said, "I want to be more. But I'm glad that he has been incredible." So the three of us, I think that the bond that we always had has strengthened, and that's what's allowed us to keep moving forward in the face of Ben's loss.
That's a beautiful message, Geoff, and you put it so, you explain it so nicely. Sorry, Mary, you had a question?
I'm a bit emotional. I read your emails and I was so emotional. It's really touched me, and I resonate with it because I have a teenager who's 19 years old, and his name is Ben. And I live on a slope, and I have a pool under my balcony. So it's quite touching. But how do you move on from losing a child? Like, we have viewers out there. How do you move on?
I don't think there's certainly no manual about what to do in this situation, and everybody has to find their own path. But for us, I think it's been very helpful for us to surround ourselves with people who are happy to talk about Ben, to remember him, to speak his name,
to celebrate his life.
And that's right. His life.
So right, what Geoff is saying, viewers. Everyone's got to have their own take on it. Before, as a lawyer, I spent 10 years on the police force, and we'd get death messages, and I had to give thousands of death messages, and many young people involved, car accidents, suicides, surfing on trains. But it was difficult. I could never get used to that. But I'd always do welfare checks on those families. Some, unfortunately, the stress got so bad they'd split up. Others did the blaming, and some very valid points you're making, Geoff, about it is what it is, and accidents do happen. And we've got to celebrate the lives of loved ones, don't we? Because there's beautiful lives that last 90 years, but there's also beautiful lives that last 21 years,
Yeah, and this is something he packed so much into the 21 years that he had. He lived life to the absolute fullest. And one of the other things that I've found very helpful personally is I've done a lot of writing over the last few years, writing about who Ben was, the experience of losing him, and the way that we've met the challenges that we've had as a family, and just expressing those thoughts and telling those stories, even if no one ever reads them, although I know people have. It's been really therapeutic for me just to do that, and to keep in touch with those memories of Ben. There was another, I think, significant moment on the morning of Ben's, what would have been his 22nd birthday, where I woke up very early in the morning and I felt like I almost had some sort of revelation about not wallowing in my own grief. And that was a real turning point, because I think from that point forward, when I think of Ben now, I always try and do so with a smile, thinking about how fortunate we were to have had him for the time that we did, and what an incredible young man he was, rather than becoming too introspective about the impact that his loss has had on me. And it's amazing how that change of mindset, I think, has helped me, and it's allowed us to, and it allows me to continue to sort of have this relationship with him.
I know a lot of people, when they lose a child or loved one, the door gets shut of the bedroom, and let's not talk about it, pretend that they shut that person out. But I feel that you've got beautiful photos of Ben all over the house. Yes.
Yes, we do, and photos of Tim too. I mean, that's the other thing.
Course.
That's the other thing. You don't want your child who's still with you to feel that they're somehow being excluded from the story as well, and I'm sure Tim doesn't feel that way, but having him to continue to support us has been incredibly important, and as I said, having a wider community around us. The support we got from Epping Boys High School was just extraordinary. They allowed us to host the celebration of his life there. Over 1,000 people turned up that day. Former teachers, the principal, prefects of the school all spoke. The university gave us great insight into the time that he'd spent there, which we didn't know a lot about. When your kids are at school...
What was he studying, Geoff?
Advanced science.
Wow.
Molecular biology was his big thing.
What did he want to do with that? Do medicine?
Well, he had got into research, and I just read something quite recently that he had written explaining what, and it's way above my level of understanding, but he'd found an area that of interest that had really switched on a light bulb for him. And he'd already begun getting involved in research at the university, which promising students are invited to participate in that kind of activity, in the hope that it will promote their interest of the subject, and it definitely had for him. Who knows where he may have gone with it, because he was a really unusual. He was academic, and he was very, very intelligent guy, but he also had this kind of charismatic personality as well. He was someone who could relate to people very easily.
If Ben could speak to you now, he would say that enjoy life, Dad, enjoy life, Mum, enjoy life, Tim. He would say that,
Well, we have there's a few little symbols of Ben that we one is the infinity symbol, which comes up from time to time. Another one that emanated through Tim is the black cockatoo. Black cockatoo is BC. Ben Cordner is BC, and we've had these amazing interactions with black cockatoos that are quite inexplicable, including on Australia Day this year, when my wife and I found ourselves surrounded by black cockatoos in a place where they don't normally appear. And even just a week or two ago, my son Tim and I were somewhere, and black cockatoos appeared out of nowhere, and one of them stayed in the vicinity of where we were for a couple of hours, which was just crazy.
Miracles.
This could be a symbol.
I've never been a religious person, but there's something going on that is hard to explain. And if it's an ongoing connection with Ben, I'm very, very pleased to see it that way.
If you've just joined in, viewers, we've got Geoff Cordner on the couch. He's been courageous enough to come in. He contacted us, and young Ben Cordner, he was 21, Australia Day 2019, left us far too early. And Geoff, the father's just sharing how the family, what mindset I suppose they've adopted to get through this, And it's true, Mary, I said, so many people they think about the wrong things, don't they? Money, competition.
I think they do. And I've read your blogs, and I have started to look at my life and how I spend my time with my son and my family and my partner. It's changed my view of thinking and thoughts and mindset. Thank you. So you've helped one person here.
Yeah, I mean, that's very gratifying to hear, because that's the thing. Once your child's no longer around, it's too late to make any change. And I also, I guess, part of why I write is I felt confident that Ben was going to meet a lot of people through the course of his life, and that he was going to have a positive influence on them. But that opportunity's been removed from him. So if one more person or a few more people can get to know him through what I write, then I'm really glad about that. And if it can lead also to people reconsidering how they approach their own relationships with their kids, or just with other people, loved ones in their lives, then I'll be delighted about that, because that's the thing. Having been through the funeral and celebration of life with Ben, and any funeral, I mean, we all go to funerals from time to time, and it's wonderful to hear those stories, and you always hear the best about the best of somebody. But wouldn't it be great to be able to share those moments while that person is still around? Tell them how much you love them. Tell them how amazing that thing was that they did, or the appreciation that you have for them while they're here.
How long after was the funeral?
We had a private funeral, I think it was on the 11th of February, which was just immediate family. And then on the 13th of February, we had a celebration of life at Epping Boys High School, which we didn't know how many people would turn up. We hoped that it would be a lot, but we were just overwhelmed, because there was there was over 1,000 people there. We had the hall that we had wasn't large enough to accommodate everybody. We had the school had set up a video screen to allow people outside to be able to see what was going on. And we were also really touched by the fact that even though Ben was 3 years out of school, there was, I think, 4 teachers, plus the principal of the school, plus the current 2 of the current prefects at the school spoke. Myself, my wife, our son Tim, Ben's girlfriend Laura did an extraordinary job. And then there was also someone from the university who spoke and who was able to tell everybody that a scholarship fund in Ben's name had been established, and a prize is now awarded at the university in Ben's name. And a couple of months later, in fact, even though he still had 3 units to complete for his course, the university awarded him a posthumous degree and an academic award for excellence, which meant an enormous amount to us, that the university was willing to bend the rules just a little bit, and I think it was a measure of the way that he was viewed there, that they were willing to do that. But yes, the celebration of life, it's a strange thing to say, but it was actually a really uplifting day.
A lot of people watching are going through different issues or maybe similar ones. How do we get through difficult times? Or how can we try? I know going to psychologists, mental health, that's certainly part of it, but then we've got to spend time on our own as well, with our own thoughts, don't we?
You have to have a level of personal resilience. There are things that you need to do as an individual that you can't expect others to do for you in order to get through difficult times. But what I've also realised is there are some things that you can't get through just on your own, and you have to be willing to open yourself up to and become vulnerable with other people and rely on others for support, because the chances are that there's people out there who are very willing to give you that support if you let them. And certainly through the experience of losing Ben, we've realised that there's this huge community of people who are willing to give us that. And without that, I don't know that we would have been able to navigate this path over these last 6 years.
And most people would fall into depression. So how did you keep your mind so strong?
Your turn, Ben.
Because there's so much else to be grateful for, and this terrible event, by far the hardest event that we've had to deal with in our lives. But there's all these other things that we have to still be thankful for, and trying to remember those, I think, helps you to deal with that tragedy.
Getting back to being grateful for everything.
Yeah.
Geoff, we honour and respect you. Thank you for coming in and sharing that story. You're a good man.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you, Geoff.
And viewers, we honour and respect you. Thank you very much for watching. We'll see you next week. All the best.